Most people fear coming home to an empty house. They're afraid of the shadows, the silence, the lack of a welcoming voice. Me? I came home early on a Tuesday afternoon, and I wished to God it had been empty. I wished the shadows were the only thing waiting for me. My name is Wayne. I'm 54 years old, and I've spent the better part of 3 decades running a small construction outfit just outside of Dallas, Texas. I'm a man of habit, hard work, and a deep, soul-deep love for my wife, Loretta. But what I'm about to tell you, it's going to make your blood run cold. It's a story about a son I thought I raised right, a daughter-in-law with a snake smile, and a betrayal that cost more than just money. Before we get into the grit of it, do me a quick favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and join our community. It helps us keep these stories coming. And hey, while you're listening, drop a comment below. What city are you watching from right now? And what time is it over there? I love seeing where you all are tuning in from. Let me tell you something about marriage. After 23 years of sharing a bed, a bank account, and a bathroom with someone, and trust me, the bathroom part is the real test of true love. You develop a sixth sense. You know when something is off. You feel it in your bones before you ever see it with your eyes. It's like a shift in the wind, a smell in the air that doesn't belong. That Tuesday, the Texas heat was pushing 98 degrees, and I felt that shift the second I turned onto our gravel driveway. I wasn't supposed to be home. My conference in Dallas had wrapped up a full day early because the keynote speaker had some kind of personal emergency. Personally, I think he just looked at the crowd and lost the will to live. Either way, I was on the first flight back. No calls, no texts. I wanted to surprise Loretta, maybe pick up her favorite spicy Thai noodles on the way. Maybe actually sit across from my wife at dinner for once, without a laptop or a blueprint between us. I was feeling good. I should have known better. The first thing that caught my eye was Travis's car in the driveway. Now, Travis is my son. He's 26 years old, married to Crystal for 2 years now. They have their own apartment across town, a real nice place that I helped furnish with my own hard-earned cash. Seeing his car at my house at 2 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon wasn't just unusual, it was plain wrong. Travis doesn't do pop-ins. Travis barely does scheduled visits unless there's a holiday or a check involved. I sat in my truck for a long minute, the AC humming, and said out loud to the empty seat, "Wayne, why is your son's car in your driveway on a Tuesday?" I didn't have an answer. So I grabbed my carry-on bag and walked to the front door. The second thing I noticed was the silence. Not the peaceful kind of silence where everyone is napping. No, this was the thick, heavy, suffocating kind of silence. The kind of silence that has actual weight to it, like a wet wool blanket. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. Travis and Crystal were sitting in the living room, huddled together on the couch. And here is the part that still makes my skin crawl. They weren't watching the television. They weren't scrolling on their phones. They were just sitting there. Like 2 people in a funeral home waiting room who had already accepted the bad news. Travis looked up first. Now, listen closely, because this is the detail that changed everything for me. He wasn't surprised to see me. Think about that. Your father, who is supposed to be hundreds of miles away, walks through the front door a full day early, and you don't even flinch. No wide eyes. "No, Dad, what are you doing here?" Nothing. Just a slow, deliberate blink, and a look that I can only describe as calculated. Then Crystal smiled. And I'm telling you, that smile had no business being on anyone's face that afternoon. It was too sharp, too rehearsed. I dropped my bag and asked, "Travis, what's going on? Where's your mother?" He cleared his throat, leaning back like he was trying to look relaxed, and said, "Dad, hey, we were actually just about to call you." "Were you?" I said it flat. Not a question, just a statement. "Mom had an episode this morning," he said, his voice as smooth as grease. "She's over at County General Hospital, but she's stable, so—" I didn't hear another word after he said the name of the hospital. I was back in my truck in 11 seconds. I know because I counted the heartbeats in my ears. Something about shock does that to you. It makes your brain latch onto the most useless details while the important ones are trying to kill you. I called Hank on the way. Hank Miller has been my best friend since 1987. The man has seen me through a divorce scare, 2 recessions, and the absolute catastrophe that was my attempt at growing a beard back in 2009. If there is anyone on this green earth who will tell me the truth without wrapping it in bubble wrap first, it's Hank. He picked up on the second ring. "Wayne, what's up, brother?" "Loretta's in the hospital," I barked into the speakerphone. "County General. I just got home, and Travis and Crystal were sitting in my living room like 2 people who already knew the ending of a movie." Dead silence on his end. Then, Hank said, "What do you mean, like they already knew?" "Hank, my son didn't even blink when I walked through the door. I was supposed to be gone until tomorrow." Another long pause. Then, very quietly, he said, "Wayne, I need you to stay calm." "I am calm," I lied, gripping the steering wheel so hard I thought the leather would snap. "No," he said, "you're driving. That's not the same thing." He wasn't wrong. County General Hospital was 15 minutes from my house. I made it in 9 minutes. I won't be taking any questions about my speed or the red lights I might have treated as suggestions. Dr. Sarah Higgins met me at the nurses' station. She was a composed woman, probably in her mid-50s, the kind of doctor who delivers hard news with steady eyes and a voice that doesn't wobble. I appreciated that. I needed steady right then. She said, "Mr. Vance, I'm glad you're here. Your wife was brought in this morning by your son. She presented with severe disorientation, organ stress, and elevated toxicity markers in her blood work." I felt the floor tilt. "Toxicity markers?" "Yes," she said. "We're running a full panel, but I want to be straightforward with you. The pattern we're seeing isn't consistent with a sudden illness. It suggests something that has been building over time." Building. That word hit me like a closed fist to the gut. I gripped the edge of the cold granite nurses' station and said, very carefully, "Dr. Higgins, are you telling me that someone is doing something to my wife?" She held my gaze, her expression grim, and said, "I'm telling you that we need more answers, and I think you do too." I went in to see Loretta, and listen, I have seen my wife in every state imaginable. I've seen her laugh so hard she cried. I've seen her furious enough to make me reconsider every life choice I've ever made. I've seen her exhausted, radiant, and heartbroken. But I was not prepared for what I saw in that ICU room. She looked hollowed out, like someone had turned a dial inside her and slowly, quietly, drained everything that made her Loretta. The machines beeped, the IV dripped, and my wife, the woman who once chased a crooked contractor out of our kitchen with a wooden spoon, lay there looking impossibly small. I sat beside her and took her hand. It felt cold. I made her a promise right then. I don't make promises lightly. Ask anyone who knows me. I whispered, "I'm here, baby, and I'm not leaving until I know exactly what happened to you." I walked back out to the waiting area. Travis and Crystal had arrived. Of course they had. Travis stood up, smoothing his shirt, and said, "Dad, we should talk. There's a lot you don't." I held up one hand, just one, and something in my face must have looked like a storm cloud because he stopped mid-sentence. "Not yet," I said. I walked to the far corner of that waiting room, pulled out my phone, and started doing the one thing they never saw coming. I started locking every single bank account they had access to. Every single one. And when the notifications started hitting their phones, because I knew they would, I watched Crystal's face first. That sweet fake smile she'd been carrying all afternoon, it evaporated, just like that. Now we were having a real conversation. And that right there was the moment I realized whatever was happening to my wife, I had just kicked the hornet's nest. The only question was, how many hornets were inside? What would you do if you saw that look on your son's face? Would you trust your gut or your blood? Let me know in the comments. Let me tell you something about denial. Denial is comfortable. Denial is warm. Denial will pour you a cup of coffee, sit across from you, and tell you that everything is fine. That you're overreacting. That you're paranoid and the people you love are incapable of the things your gut is screaming at you about. I had lived in denial for probably longer than I care to admit. But sitting in that hospital parking lot at 9:43 at night with my wife hooked up to machines 30 feet above me and my son's eyes burned into my memory, I evicted denial permanently. Changed the locks and everything. I called Hank. He picked up before it even finished the first ring. "Talk to me," he said. "She looks terrible, Hank," I said, and my voice did something embarrassing on that last word that I will not be elaborating on. The doctor used the word toxicity, said it's been building, not a sudden thing, something gradual. I heard him exhale slowly. Then, "Wayne, gradual means deliberate." "I know what it means," I said. And Travis and Crystal were in the house. They're in the waiting room right now, looking like they're waiting for a bus instead of their mother's life to be saved. Silence. Then Hank said something I will never forget as long as I live. He said, "Brother, you need to think very carefully about who had access to Loretta's food, her drinks, her medication every day over the last few months. You need to think about who was around." And that's when it hit me. 4 months ago, Loretta had twisted her ankle coming down the stairs. Nothing serious, a bad sprain. But Travis had swooped in almost immediately and suggested that Crystal, who worked part-time and had a flexible schedule, could come by the house every morning to help Loretta with breakfast and her medications while I was at work. At the time, I thought it was generous. I actually told Hank, maybe I misjudged that boy. I want to go back in time and slap myself across the face for being that blind. I went back inside. Travis was standing by the vending machine, arms crossed, wearing an expression I can only describe as a man trying very hard to look innocent and failing at a graduate level. Crystal was seated, phone face down on her lap. Now, and I need you to understand the significance of this, Crystal is never without her phone. That woman is physically attached to that device. I once watched her scroll through it during a Thanksgiving prayer. So, a face-down phone meant she was either expecting a call she didn't want me to see, or she'd already received one. Probably a notification from the bank telling her the gravy train had just hit a brick wall. I sat down directly across from them. Travis said, "Dad, I know how this looks." I said, "Do you, Travis? Walk me through exactly how you think this looks, because I am genuinely curious." He shifted in his seat. "Mom has been having health issues for a while. We were trying to help. Crystal was coming by every morning, making sure she ate, took her vitamins." "Her vitamins?" I repeated. "Yes." "Which vitamins?" I asked, keeping my voice as cold as a January morning. He blinked. "What?" I said, "Which vitamins?" "She takes 3 different supplements," he stammered. "Which ones was Crystal giving her?" He looked at Crystal. Crystal looked at her lap. And that right there, that 3-second exchange of panicked glances, told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't love bringing them to that house every morning. It was opportunity. I stood up and said, "I'm going to need both of you to go home." "But Dad," Travis started. "Travis." I said his name once, quietly, the way my own father used to say mine when I was about to do something I could not take back. "Go home. Now." They left, but the air didn't get any cleaner. I sat in that waiting room with a cup of terrible hospital coffee that tasted like burnt rubber. And I did what any reasonable man who suspects his son and daughter-in-law of poisoning his wife would do. I started digging. I pulled up every bank statement from the last 6 months on my phone. And listen, I am not a forensic accountant. I am a man who still finds online banking mildly suspicious on a good day. But even I could see that something was wrong. There were withdrawals, small ones at first, 200 here, 350 there. The kind of amounts that don't scream at you, they whisper. But when I added them up, we were looking at close to $11,000 over 5 months from a joint account that Loretta and I shared, an account that Travis had limited access to for emergencies. $11,000. That's a lot of emergencies for a kid with a brand new car and a wife who doesn't like to work. I called Hank at 2 o'clock in the morning. He answered like it was noon. 11,000, I said without even saying hello. From which account? The joint household account. Small withdrawals, consistent, like someone who knew exactly how to stay under the radar. Hank was quiet for a moment. Then, Wayne, that's not impulsive. That's planned. That's someone who sat down and thought about how to do this without getting caught. Someone who was waiting for her to be too confused to notice the balance dropping. "My son," I said. And I'll be honest with you, those two words nearly broke me right there in that waiting room at 2 o'clock in the morning. My son sat down and planned this. He didn't just make a mistake, he laid a trap. The next morning, Dr. Sarah Higgins found me exactly where she'd left me, in that plastic waiting room chair, looking like a man who had been through a war and lost. She sat down beside me, which doctors don't typically do unless the news is very good or very, very bad. She said, "Mr. Vance," the full panel came back. "Tell me straight, doctor." She sighed, a heavy sound. "Your wife has elevated levels of a compound consistent with long-term ingestion of a specific heavy metal. The levels suggest consistent exposure over a period of months. Her kidneys are under significant stress, which explains the disorientation and the collapse. We've started the flushing treatment, and I want to be clear, we caught this. She has a strong chance of recovery because you brought her in when you did." I closed my eyes, just for a second, feeling the relief and the rage battle it out in my chest. Then I said, "Dr. Higgins, if someone were doing this deliberately, how would they administer it?" She paused, choosing her words like she was walking through a minefield. "It could be introduced through food, through drink, or through supplements, particularly powder-based ones that dissolve easily and have no distinct taste." I heard Travis's voice in my head again. Crystal was coming by every morning, making sure she ate, took her vitamins. I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor with a screech that echoed down the hall. Dr. Higgins put a hand on my arm. "Mr. Vance." "I need to make a phone call," I said. I called my attorney first, then I called the bank and had every remaining account locked, restructured, and password protected with codes that only I and my attorney had access to. I removed Travis's emergency access. I removed the automatic transfers. I removed every single safety net I had ever built for him. Within 20 minutes, my phone started ringing. Travis 4 times, Crystal twice. Then a text from Travis that said, "Dad, what did you do? Why can't I access anything? Call me back right now, right now." All capital letters, the tone of a spoiled child who just realized the candy store is closed. I stared at that message for a long time. This was a young man who, as recently as Christmas, had hugged me at the door and told me I was the best father he could have asked for. I had believed him. I had beamed with pride over that. I typed back one sentence. "You should have thought about that before you touched my wife." I put my phone in my pocket and walked back upstairs to sit with Loretta. But there was something else now, something cold and focused sitting in my chest where the fear used to be. I still didn't know why. $1,000 is a lot of money, but it's not kill your mother money, not for someone like Travis. People don't do something this calculated, this patient, without a much bigger destination in mind. I needed to find out where they were trying to go. I'm about to uncover the real reason they did it, and trust me, it's uglier than the money. If you're still with me, drop a "keep going" in the comments so I know you're listening. What do you think they were really after? Let me tell you something about the truth. The truth doesn't always arrive dramatically. It doesn't always kick the door down, flip the table, and announce itself with thunder and lightning. Sometimes, and this is the part that really gets you, the truth slides in quietly, through a phone call, on an otherwise unremarkable Thursday morning, while you're drinking bad hospital coffee and watching the sun come up through a waiting room window. That's how mine arrived. Hank called at 7:14 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was staring at the clock, willing the minutes to move faster so I could go back in and check on Loretta. He didn't even say hello. He just said, "Wayne, you need to brace yourself. This is bigger than $11,000. It's bigger than a few stolen checks." I set down my coffee, my hand trembling just a hair, and said, "Tell me, Hank, give it to me straight." 6 weeks before Loretta ended up in that ICU, she had visited an estate attorney, alone, without telling me. Now, knowing Loretta, that meant she was planning a surprise. Loretta was a planner. Birthdays, anniversaries, Christmas. The woman could orchestrate a military operation around a Sunday dinner party. What she had done was update her life insurance policy. The original policy had Travis listed as the secondary beneficiary. Standard stuff, something we'd set up 20 years ago when he was just a kid in baseball cleats. But Loretta had gone in to remove Travis entirely. She was redirecting every cent to a charitable trust she'd been quietly building for 2 years, a literacy foundation for underprivileged kids. She wanted to present it to me as a fully functioning legacy once it was finalized. That was my Loretta, never half measures. The policy was worth $2,300,000. Travis had found out. I don't know how. Maybe he poked through her desk, maybe he saw a stray email, and honestly, that detail doesn't even matter anymore. What matters is that he realized his mother was about to cut him out of $2,300,000. And instead of picking up the phone and having a conversation like a grown man, he and Crystal had sat down in their nice apartment, the one I paid for, and decided that the most reasonable response was to make sure Loretta didn't live long enough to finalize the paperwork. The attorney had a 30-day processing window for the changes. Loretta had exactly 30 days left on that window when she collapsed in our kitchen. 30 days. My wife had 30 days left to live in their plan. I sat with that information for a long time. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just sat in that plastic waiting room chair and let the full weight of it settle onto my chest like a tombstone. $2 million. That's what her life was worth to them. Not the woman who tucked him in, not the woman who stayed up all night when he had the flu, but a payout. Then I stood up, straightened my jacket, and walked to the window. I made a decision right there. I was not going to be loud about this. I was not going to be sloppy. I was not going to confront Travis in a hospital hallway and give him the opportunity to lawyer up on my dime and turn this into a circus. I was going to be methodical. I called my attorney, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Brenda Vance. She's been practicing law for 30 years and has the energy of someone who genuinely enjoys watching people face the consequences of their own stupidity. I told her everything. The $11,000 in withdrawals, the supplements Crystal was helping with, the timing of the insurance policy, all of it. She was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Then she said, "Wayne, don't touch a single thing in that house. Don't confront either of them. Don't post anything on social media. Don't say a word to the neighbors. And for heaven's sake, don't hint at what you know. Can you do that for me?" "I can do that," I said, my voice sounding like gravel. "Good," she said, "because I'm going to coordinate with the local precinct and the hospital board. I'm going to make sure that when this lands, it lands completely. No cracks, no exits, no excuses." I said, "Brenda, I want them to feel every single inch of this." She let out a dry, sharp laugh. "Honey, by the time I'm done, they'll feel the square footage." The next 72 hours were the longest of my 54 years on this earth. I had to play the part of the grieving, confused father while Loretta was fighting her way back. But Dr. Higgins was cautiously optimistic. The treatment was working. Her kidney function was stabilizing, and on the second day, she opened her eyes. She looked at me, her eyes tracking slow and heavy, and said in the most exhausted, gravelly version of her voice, "Wayne, you look like hell." And I laughed. I actually laughed out loud in the middle of the ICU. The nurse looked at me like I'd lost my mind, and maybe I had. But hearing Loretta's sarcasm, that specific brand of loving, devastating sarcasm I had taken for granted for 23 years, felt like someone had reached into my chest and restarted my heart. I leaned forward and whispered, "You're in the ICU and you're critiquing my appearance? Really?" She said, very weakly but very distinctly, "Someone has to." I held her hand and I did not let go for a very long time. I didn't tell her everything yet. She needed to heal first. The full truth could wait until she was strong enough to carry it. But I told her she was safe. I told her I knew what had happened and that everything was being handled. She looked at me for a long moment with those sharp eyes of hers, the ones that had always seen straight through my nonsense. And she said, "It was Travis, wasn't it?" It wasn't a question, it was a realization. I didn't answer, I just held her hand tighter. She closed her eyes and said quietly, "I always knew that boy had my worst qualities and none of my best ones." Even half-conscious in a hospital bed, Loretta Vance was the most formidable woman I had ever known. On day 4, Brenda called me with news that made the hair on my arm stand up. Hank, God bless that man, had quietly obtained surveillance footage from a pharmacy 2 towns over. Travis had purchased a specific supplement brand on 3 separate occasions over 4 months. He always paid cash. He was always alone, except for the 3rd visit, when the pharmacy's exterior camera caught Crystal waiting in the passenger seat of their car. The supplement contained trace amounts of a heavy metal compound. In small doses, it looks like a health boost. In large doses, administered consistently over months, it produces exactly the toxicity profile Dr. Higgins found in Loretta's blood. Brenda also had the bank records. She had a digital trail of the $11,000. She had the estate attorney confirming the timeline, and then the icing on the cake. Travis, in what I can only describe as a breathtaking act of sheer stupidity, had actually called the estate attorney's office, posing as Loretta's personal assistant, to ask about the status of the policy changes. He had left a callback number, his own personal cell phone number. I sat there on the phone with Brenda, staring at the hospital wall for 10 seconds, and then I asked, "Brenda, did I raise a criminal mastermind or a complete and utter idiot?" Brenda sighed. "Wayne, the answer is somehow both. I don't know about you, but I've always said that greed makes people stupid. Have you ever seen someone throw away their entire life for a payday that wasn't even theirs yet? Drop a karma in the comments if you're ready to see how I finish this." They came to the hospital on day 5, together. They were carrying flowers, bright, cheerful, yellow daisies, and wearing the expressions of 2 people who had decided that a charm offensive was their best remaining strategy. They looked like they had practiced their worried faces in the mirror all morning. Travis walked in first, saw me standing in the corridor outside Loretta's room, and immediately deployed a smile that did not reach his eyes by approximately 40 miles. He said, "Dad, how is she? We've been so worried we could barely sleep." I looked at him, then at Crystal, then back at him. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I just looked at them like they were a pair of broken floorboards I needed to replace. "She's awake," I said, my voice flat and calm. "She's talking, and she's going to make a full recovery." I watched something flicker behind his eyes. It wasn't relief. It wasn't joy. It was a very fast, very brief recalculation. The kind a person makes when a plan has failed, and they need to figure out what comes next. He was already thinking about his next move, but I was already 4 moves ahead of him. Crystal forced a little sob and said, "That's such wonderful news, Wayne. We were so scared." "The police are on their way," I said, just like that. The silence that followed was so loud it felt like it was ringing. I didn't raise my voice. I used the same tone I might use to mention that it was supposed to rain on Friday. Travis's face drained of color so fast it was almost medically impressive. He went from tan to a sickly, chalky white in 3 seconds. "What?" he stammered. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Brenda Vance filed everything this morning," I said, leaning back against the cold hospital wall. "The pharmacy receipts for the heavy metal supplements. The bank records showing the $11,000 you siphoned off. The recorded phone call you made to the estate attorney's office from your own cell phone. Dr. Higgins's toxicology report. All of it. Every piece in a very neat, very legal package." Crystal made a sound that I can only describe as a person's composure physically leaving their body. She looked like she was about to bolt for the elevator. Travis reached out a hand. "Dad, just listen for 1 second, okay? Just let me explain. We were just trying to—" "Stop," I said. Because I am, despite everything, his father, I let him have that one last moment of silence. "There is nothing you can say to me right now, Travis. There is not a sentence in the English language that covers what you did to your mother. So I need you to stop talking. Permanently." He opened his mouth. I stared him down until he closed it. I looked at the daisies in his hand. The flowers are nice, though. Loretta will appreciate them. From someone else. They were arrested in the hospital parking lot at 3:15 that afternoon. I watched from the fourth-floor window. Brenda had timed it with the precision of a woman who understood that optics matter. They were still holding those yellow flowers when the officers approached. Travis tried to talk his way through it, because he's always believed his voice was his most powerful tool. Crystal went quiet in a way that suggested she was already calculating a plea arrangement to sell him out. Hank appeared beside me at the window. I don't even know when he arrived. He just materialized the way he always does when things matter most. We stood there together and watched the patrol cars pull away. "How do you feel?" Hank asked. I thought about it honestly, and I said, like I aged 10 years in 5 days. Like I want to sleep for a month. Like I am simultaneously the saddest I have ever been, and the most certain I have ever felt about anything in my life. Then I looked back toward Loretta's room. Through the small rectangular window in her door, I could see her sitting up, talking to a nurse. I said, "Loretta's going to be fine. She's the toughest person I know, and she married me, which proves she can survive anything." Hank laughed, a real one. It bounced off the corridor walls, and for just a moment, the weight lifted. 3 months later, Loretta came home. She walked through the front door of our house on a Saturday morning in October, when the Texas light was doing that golden thing it does in the fall. She stood in the hallway and looked around like she was cataloging everything she had almost lost. Then she turned to me and said, "Wayne, the kitchen needs repainting." I said, "Absolutely not. I just painted it 2 years ago." She said, "It's the wrong shade of white." "There is only one shade of white, Loretta." "That," she said, pointing at the wall with the authority of a woman who had stared down death and won, "is not white. That is the color of a bureaucratic apology. I want it bright." I looked at the wall. I looked at her. I pulled out my phone and called a painter. Travis and Crystal faced charges of attempted murder, conspiracy, and financial fraud. Brenda Vance prosecuted with the energy of someone who had been waiting her entire career for a case this clean. The trial lasted 11 days. The jury took 4 hours to reach a verdict. They were sentenced significantly. I won't give you the exact number of years because, frankly, whatever number I say won't feel like enough. When the verdict was read, I was sitting in that courtroom next to Loretta. She was holding my hand with a grip that could have been made of steel. And when it was over, she leaned over to me and said very quietly, "I want Thai food." I said, "Right now?" She said, "I have been thinking about those spicy noodles for months, Wayne. Do not test me." So we got Thai food. Hank came. Brenda came. Dr. Sarah Higgins even joined us. We sat around a big table and we laughed, and I watched my wife gesture wildly while telling a story. And I thought, there she is. There's my Loretta. I said at the beginning of this story that I came home early, and I wish to God the house had been empty. I take that back. I am glad I came home. I am glad I walked through that door when I did. Because if I had landed 1 day later, if that conference in Dallas had run its full schedule, Loretta wouldn't have made it. So no, I don't wish the house had been empty. I wish my son had been the man I thought I raised. But you can't control what people choose to become in the dark. You can only control what you do when the lights come on. I came home. I turned the lights on. And I made sure the people in that house faced exactly what they had done. That's the job. That's always been the job. Thank you so much for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to tell, but sometimes the truth needs to be heard. If you've made it this far, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and keep sharing these real, raw accounts of life and justice. Before you go, I want to ask one more time, what city are you watching from and what time is it there? Also, drop a comment and let me know, did I do the right thing by my son or was I too harsh? I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you want to support what we do, check the link in the description to donate or just click on the next video to keep the stories going. Take care of your loved ones, keep your eyes open, and I'll see you in the next one.